welcome back to Petty Astrology. We have two brand new people on the podcast today. You guys have never been on Petty Astrology before, right?
Never.
No, I'm so excited to be here for the first time ever in my life.
I know, that's wild. Today we're going to be talking about Cancer and Capricorn, which I am very excited about because this is another where we are well represented with this energy. So I have a Cancer rising and a Capricorn moon. Jen, what do you got?
I got a Cancer moon and a Capricorn Mars.
Slay.
Yes, and I have a Cancer Mars, and I've got that Uranus Neptune conjunction in Capricorn, but not quite personal.
Yeah, same. Us millennials, we've got it going on here today with this energy. We know it well. We love it. We hate it sometimes. Mostly we love it, I think. So let's get into it. Let's start with Cancer. So first of all, Cancer is a water sign. It is also a cardinal sign, and it is ruled by the moon and typically symbolized by the crab. And it's also associated with the fourth house in astrology, and it governs the breasts and the stomach. Ooh la la. So, what comes to mind when you guys think of Cancer?
Home. Like very innately just like in the mother and just feeling like held, and also associated with like family and just sort of like those very close like I guess like blood relations.
Mm,
Um and also just being cozy and like the emotional support that you get from people that you're around. It's not always, our families aren't always like great, so there's like some sort of always kind of like association with maybe like issues with mother or conflict in the family, or like family patterns as
mm.
well. There can be, you know so when I think of Cancer, it does feel like nurturing, but it also can be, I don't know, on another end, like smothering in a way. So
Right,
there's
right. There's a
it's like
fine line between nurturing and smothering, isn't there?
yeah.
What about you, Mackenzie?
Yeah, I also think of like home and family and like baked goods and stuff like that. But then I also think of like the protective mama bear energy. Like I just think of Cancer just being so like protective, and that can also be like almost like helicopter mom, but
Mm,
just like very protective and nurturing and like warm and loving, and just like where you go when you need that feeling of like needing to cry on someone's shoulder, like that kind of feeling, just like feeling held and supported emotionally. And also like that sensitivity that Cancer
mm.
energy can be, like just very sensitive. It's like that crab underneath its shell, like it's just like that, like gooey flesh. It's just like super sensitive, and that's not a bad thing. But yeah, just
Yeah.
like that sensitivity and emotional nature of Cancer as well.
Well, we have three Cancerians here. So, how many of us have ever been called too sensitive?
Oh yeah.
Probably all of us.
Yeah.
Present.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, that leads us to talking a little bit about the stereotypes that come with Cancer energy. And I know that crybaby is one of them.
Oh yeah.
So, with Cancer energy, there is absolutely that sensitivity there. And there is this association with crying with Cancer. And for me, as a Cancer rising, that is like a release valve for me. And like I will cry. I remember I went to a Beyonce concert in 2016, and I was like not very well funded at the time, so we were like in the nosebleeds, and I was so like overwhelmed by the emotions of that experience that I was like just sobbing the entire concert. I was having the best time. I was not sad at all. And I just was so like overwhelmed by the production and the music and the environment that I was just like I could not. It was actually kind of embarrassing cuz I was like just could not stop crying. And so I think that people kind of have this misconception that crying is either a sign of weakness or it's just like annoying and something that we do for attention. How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, as a crybaby coming from me, I, it really is just a release valve. It's just kind of like if I don't have a good cry, like at least once a week, it's almost like I feel like congested emotionally. I don't know if that makes
Mm,
sense. Just kind of like
yeah,
stuffed up. Like I need to have like a nice cry at least once a week. And, I cry even like I cry when I'm mad, I cry when I'm sad, I cry when I'm
same.
happy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's like also like a first house moon thing, but
Mm,
yeah, it's just like, and like crying is not the only emotion. Like, it's just, one of many. But yeah.
but it's our personal water, which is funny because Cancer is a water sign and it is this like water valve. It is our bodies making water come out of our faces. Which is funny too because the moon in Cancer, and when I think of Cancer, I also think of the moon, and I do think of like the face in the moon and like mother smiling down at us.
Yes, that's mother.
And as a Cancer rising, like I have the honor of like seeing that in my own face, or like other Cancer risings is like that glow, that orb, and then we can make water come out of our face. It's like more metal, I think, than people give us credit for. But maybe I'm biased on that one. But yeah, I agree. Totally a release valve. And I don't think we talk enough about like how good it can feel after you cry. It's like this release of energy and something that you're feeling emotionally is transmuting through the physical and then it's becoming something else. And that process I think is really really magical.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And like even when scientists like take different tears from like when people are feeling different emotions, they're crying from like happiness or sadness or whatever, like the chemical composition of the tears is different depending on the
Mm.
emotion that's happening. So it is kind of like there's like some sort of alchemy happening in the body when you're having these emotions and there's a release that's coming out. Like the substance, the physical substance that's secreted is different depending on what emotion you're feeling. And I mean, as a Cancer moon, I am also have been accused of being a crybaby, and I kind of, I agree. Like I, if there's any big emotion, my first reaction will always be like tearing up or
Hmm.
crying. And I used to get very annoyed as a child, being like, I don't want to cry. Like I don't. People would like make fun of me or be like, why are you crying? Like it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, I know it's not, but like I have feelings and they
Right.
need to come out.
Yeah. I think we need to stop associating crying with just like being sad, because it's
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
really like all purpose, as we Cancerians can tell you. It's an all purpose reaction to things. Happy, sad, not
Yeah.
in the middle, don't even know what you feel. Cry, just cry. Cry, see what happens.
It feels like I feel like cancers are so sensitive and we have, I guess, it'd be like think like a bathtub when you're like filling it with water. It's like the emotion, and then at a certain point, there gets to be too much for that vessel, and it overflows. And that's what it
Mhm.
feels like when it just like there's this feeling that wells up, and my body cannot physically contain it. So it has to come out somewhere. And if I
Mhm.
try to push that down and not cry, like I will be irritable, I will lash out at people. So kind of like allowing myself and other cancers kind of like giving us that permission to be like it's okay to cry, and it doesn't make you weak, it doesn't make you like manipulative or like a crybaby if that's your reaction to things, because it's very natural and human. It's not,
Yeah.
Hmm.
it's not a bad thing to be a crybaby.
And it's the least worst thing that we can be doing in that moment, because let me just tell you, as a Cancer rising, if I'm crying, you should be glad I'm not doing something else, not doing whatever I'm crying about in my head. Because there is this like association with weakness and crying. And this kind of goes into something that I was going to ask next. Have you had readings with anybody who has like maybe the Cancer Mars is coming to mind, where somebody was like, oh, I don't really like that. I don't really like it, feels like, weak, or, not a great placement or anything like that, or like somebody was like kind of struggling with kind of conceptualizing their Cancer Mars. And I was like, first of all, tenacious as hell, because if you piss off a Cancer Mars, and I'm sure Mackenzie can speak to this very directly, it's like they're gonna grab on to that situation and they're not gonna let go. Like,
No. Mm-mm.
that's the tenacity of Cancer, and I think that's one of the things that gets lost with all of the kind of crybaby stereotyping that can happen.
Yeah, I think of like a snapping turtle. Like if you're bothering it too much and you stick your fingers near its mouth, it's not gonna let go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be not my like favorite trait, because I do unfortunately hold a mean grudge. There's people even from middle school that I still don't like because I just can't let it go,
Same.
but it's hard.
Same. Well, the other side of that is that Cancers, there is this association with family, which Jen articulated beautifully. It's not necessarily just your blood relatives, although that family pattern stuff is certainly a part of it. But Cancer energy tends to really take the people that are closest to them, that they feel are their people, very seriously. So if you mess with somebody that a Cancerian cares about, God help you. God help you, because there is, like Mackenzie was saying, we can hold a mean grudge, absolutely, but like it's that mama bear energy. Like, is there anything scarier than a mother whose babies are under threat? Like,
Hmm.
that's when all hell breaks loose. That's when there's nothing left to lose. And I think this is a really important thing to understand about Cancerian energy, is that it is very protective in that way. It really does care about its people. And so you hurt somebody that they care about, that's a huge problem for a
Hmm.
Cancerian.
Mm-hmm. There's been a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
situations where people have like messed with me personally, and I'm like, oh, whatever, like it's not worth getting into it. But then they mess with someone I care about. I'm like, all right, fuck you, actually. Like,
Yes.
how dare you?
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
my
Literally same.
person. Like, how dare
Hmm.
you?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's Cancer energy is not weak energy, and also it's a cardinal sign, and so our cardinal signs are kind of the starters of the season. So of course, Cancer is the start of summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's not energy that needs somebody else to lead the way. It's not like I need somebody to go out before me, and it's just not energy that needs to follow behind anybody. Like if they feel strongly about something, they don't really need the direction of another to kind of navigate that energy.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misogyny that gets revealed in how people think and talk about Cancer energy because it is associated with the moon and women and the mother. And those are all positions and identities that are just shit on so much by society or just not taken seriously as like powerful forces that they are.
Yeah.
Like the mother of a household is like the household manager, and there's so many tasks that they do that are just unrecognized, but if they don't get done, then it's a problem. But if everything's running well, then it's kind of easy to be like, oh, like that's just how things are supposed to be, and you can like overlook the amount of work that goes into making a house or a family or a situation good or functioning right. So there's a lot of like emotional labor or just like care tasks that are just seen as like, that's what you're supposed to do, and the energy isn't always respected. um but yeah, it's like vital energy to be supported emotionally and physically, and maybe like having clean clothes, having dishes to eat off of, having a meal prepared for you. All of those things, if you don't have those, you cannot go out into the world and do stuff.
Yeah. And having a safe space, having people that have
Mhm.
your back, having emotional security on some level, like all of those things, I think we really underestimate the role that they play socially, because I think we are kind of an emotionally constipated culture.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to be gross, but it is disgusting.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So I think Cancerians, there's a bravery with it too, because I mean, a Cancer can start swinging under the right conditions, but like also a Cancer will hold you when you are sobbing and there is snot rolling down your face and it's disgusting, but they're going to hold you through it and be able to deal with emotions in a way, and not every Cancer is, emotionally evolved, but especially an emotionally evolved Cancer is really going to be able to hold space for a whole spectrum of emotions. And I think we really underestimate the power and how necessary that is socially.
Mhm.
So let's move on to talking about Capricorn. And Capricorn is, of course, the sister sign to Cancer. So let's get into it. So, Capricorn, it's an earth sign, it is a cardinal sign, it is ruled by Saturn. It is symbolized by the sea goat. Very important to note that it's a sea goat, right? Because, like, what the hell is that? We'll talk about it. It's also associated with the 10th house, and it governs the bones and the joints in the body. What comes to mind when you think of Capricorn energy? I'll start. Daddy.
Yes.
The mommy and the daddy episode. I'm both.
Totally.
Literally.
Me and Jen are both mommy and daddy, and I think like if you get to know us, it makes sense. We are
Yeah.
mommy and daddy. The duality.
Yeah, I think of like discipline and structure and maybe like methodical and, tenacious in the same way, kind of similar way as Cancer. But they're just like not gonna give up. They're plodding along towards
Mm-hmm.
their goals. They can be very yeah, like methodical, maybe a little traditional in the way that they see things. Um yeah, there's like a sense of authority that I think Capricorns just kind of exude.
We love that. What about you, Mackenzie?
Yeah, definitely the authority like really stands out to me. Just like when they enter a room, it's almost like people just like feel their presence and like automatically like not always, but like it's just like this respect that they can almost like bring in. And I also
Yeah.
think of like just this, they're very responsible, hardworking, ambitious, and like I always think of like the mountain with Capricorn energy. It's just like it takes that slow and steady work to climb a mountain, and you have to have like that goal in sight. And so like they're never short for goals. Just very goal oriented, and
Mm-hmm.
creating like solid foundations. And they're also good with like boundaries and setting boundaries with people, sometimes too good. So yeah.
Hey, watch it. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey.
Hey, hey, this is where me and Jen get to be offended because Mackenzie
Right.
doesn't
I'll
have
just
any
offend you guys
personal.
the rest of the episode.
I would honestly love that, Mackenzie. Like, I would love a Mackenzie read for this
Oh
episode.
my
Give it
god.
to me. And then we've got Jen's Saturn in the background there as well. So perfect, perfect
Oh
for this
yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
When you were mentioning the mountain, it made me think about the sea goat aspect of it. And the sea goat. Like, what is a sea goat? So it's a goat, the, the head of a goat, and the ass of some sort of fishy mermaid type entity. Obviously, it's not a real creature that we know of.
Yeah,
That we know
it could
of.
be real.
It could be real. It could be real. Anything's possible. And so what I think of about that is like it can go anywhere, right? It can be down in the depths of the ocean, and it can also climb to the highest precipice of a mountain. And it's about the journey. I really feel like that's part of kind of the Capricorn energy, is this like long process. It's not quick energy necessarily. It's like that slow and steady continuation. And so like if you're going to be journeying from the bottom of the sea to the top of a mountain, it's like you have to have kind of all of the equipment necessary to make that journey, right? I think Capricorn energy at its best is really kind of capable of navigating whatever kind of comes its way and not letting it get in the way of the ultimate objective. So that's what sea goat means to me.
It almost like feels like a crocodile or like an alligator. You know, they are in water, but they can also like be on land. So I don't know. It's like a when I first learned about like the sea goat or whatever, it said like they're able to swim those like psychic waters with the tail, but then they're also able to climb the tallest mountains. And so yeah, it's just like it's really a mystical sign, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
not talked about enough.
Let's
Just
talk about
how
it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's
it
talk
really
about it
is a
because
mystical sign.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that because as somebody with a Capricorn moon, it's, you know, quote unquote detriment. None of us use exaltation or detriment in our astrology, and we have good reasons. We can talk about that on another episode. But it's like people do have this negative stereotype towards Cancer moons in particular. And I gotta say, I'm really happy with what I have got with the Cancer moon. And I love what you said because I do
Cancer moon.
oh, I'm
Capricorn.
sorry. Capricorn moon. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
I
we
should
think
start
moon
drinking before
Cancer.
noon, huh?
Yeah,
Just kidding. I'm dead sober, guys. Don't worry. Um, not a margarita day today. Not yet, anyway.
not yet.
I like my Capricorn moon is the headline here. Is I don't think that it. I think I'm very emotionally aware, and you know I have a whole chart, so it's not just down to the Capricorn moon. But like I do think that there is the stereotype of like lack of emotionality with
Hmm.
Capricorn, and my
Yeah.
damn moon is Capricorn, and there's it couldn't be further from the truth. I
Right.
think the thing is that I just don't tend to get my emotions all over other people. I think they
Hmm.
tend to be more contained, and there's a boundary there. Like I'm not just getting into my shit with just about anybody. If you guys hadn't, I think
Hmm.
I made enough episodes of this podcast. I could have gotten into some more shit than I have had I not had this Capricorn moon. But yeah,
Yeah.
I like the mystical aspect of it. I love that because it does ring true for me.
Yeah. When I think of Capricorn, people do see it as kind of like this emotionless sign, or like they don't have strong feelings because they don't show it as like visibly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know a Capricorn, you know that they are deeply emotional. They are sister signs with Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a little bit more remote and removed, but that doesn't mean they don't have those big feelings. It's just kind of there's a container for them a little more,
Hmm.
um, because they do have a lot of structure in their life. Capricorns love, having structure, having things in their places, having like a time and a place for things. So if
Mm-hmm.
it's not the time and place to bring that box out, you're not going to see that. But if you're close to a Capricorn, then and they feel safe with bringing those things out, then you know that they are, just as unhinged as Cancer can be.
Oh, for sure. I think that it is definitely girl boss energy. Unfortunately, I do find myself girl bossing a bit, and I'm like, gosh, shit. But I do think that, like, knowing that there's a time and a place for unpacking emotions, it's like I have other things that are really important to me that I'm working towards long term. And so I think the important thing with Capricorn energy is like just not bypassing the emotions, because they're absolutely feeling them. They just might be tucking them away because it's like not the right time. But sometimes, like an unhealthy or, a
Mm-hmm.
struggling Capricorn, they can tuck stuff away and then forget to go back for it. And then that becomes the
Yeah.
issue, I think. And that, I think, is what people are reading as like, you're not emotional. It's like, well, it's just in the suitcase.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like this idea of like professionality, and like
Hmm.
when you show up as like your business self and you're like doing deals and stuff, you're not gonna be like, that's not a therapy session, you know. So
Right.
I think Capricorn very very clearly knows like the dividing line between those things, and they're not going to cross over. Like they're not going to be the person that like starts sobbing in a business meeting, unless it's like, you know, they've absolutely been holding it in for way too long.
Yeah, that
If
would be a moment.
that would be a sight to see for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like this expectation that, you know, somebody that is cold and girl bossing, like that they're just not in touch with themselves, and that's
Hmm.
usually, you know, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And there's like
Yeah.
that association with Saturn and it being structure and discipline and those long-term things. It's like, if that feeling, that emotion right now is not going to get me towards my goal, like then that's like, all right, that's for later, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Saturn association, because I do think that that is part of why the stereotypes about Capricorn are what they are, and kind of that harshness. Because I do think that we generally have this issue where, especially in pop astrology, Saturn is kind of considered this like negative force, and like people are terrified of their Saturn return. Like, it's just really out of hand. And we are, Saturn lovers here. And one of the important things to remember is that having structure, having some sort of bones to a situation, and remembering that Capricorn is the governor of bones and joints, right? Like the very structure that allows us to take on a physical existence is something that is very Saturnian. Like, there is no human existence without the physical, and the physical is very much to do with Saturn. So that,
Mm-hmm.
I think we underestimate how much our physical embodiment is a spiritual experience. And that kind of goes back to what Mackenzie was saying about like how, it is a more spiritual sign and a more psychic sign than it is given credit for. It
Mm-hmm.
is spiritual to be in a human body, to be this bag of bones that each one of us is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, just like we're learning as humans, and that's kind of like that Saturnian, just like, it won't be easy, but it'll be worthwhile and it'll be worth it. And um, yeah, that's kind of like that. Because it's kind of like a spiritual guide in a way. And I think maybe it's because Saturn's in Pisces right now that I just got that image, but who knows?
well, if you are a person that is approaching their spirituality, having some sort of structure, having people that have some kind of established practice to learn from can be a really important part of how we ourselves can build a spiritual practice of our own, is like learning from other people who have kind of walked the path before us. And I think that's a very Saturnian type of connection that we can have, is like mentorship. Is it can be a Saturnian thing.
I like Saturn as like, it's a very spiritual planet to me, because it is, you reap what you sow. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're putting bad energy out, like you're gonna get, you know, consequences for that. And there's just, yeah, like consequences for your actions, good or
Mm-hmm.
bad. Consequences have this sort of negative association when people like evoke karma. It's like, oh, that bad thing's gonna happen to somebody, but it's on the other side. It's like, if you're taking care of yourself, if you're doing all the things that you need to do, you will reap rewards for that as well. So it's kind of like just that universal law of like what you plant is what you sow. So
Yeah.
and those like the fruits of the tree show you like the character of the person. Getting in like that like Christianity part of it, but I steal things from them all the time.
Hey, they steal shit all the time too. So,
Right.
Yeah,
you know, you
yeah.
gotta even the score a little bit. Jesus.
So yeah, that's what I see with like I mean, people like malign Saturn and see it as this like great evil, but it's just like showing you very clearly like what you're putting out is what you're getting, or there's maybe some lesson that you need to learn. You know, bad. It's not always that like bad things are happening to you if you're doing bad stuff. I mean, that's just life. Like things
Yeah.
happen.
Hmm.
But in general, there's like that spiritual balance. Like if you're not doing those things daily to kind of keep up your spiritual hygiene or like your spiritual practice, you're not engaging with that, then you're not going to get as much out of it as someone else would if they're like putting in that time every day and have that routine down. That's just the way it works. You know, you can't
Mm-hmm.
just be like cramming for the test the night before and expect to do as well as somebody that's like studying for like 30 minutes every day. Like there's a very big difference in how those things integrate into your body. Like you
Yeah.
can't there's no shortcuts with Saturn.
Hmm. I
Mm-hmm.
think it is a very spiritual thing to return to something again and again and again and again, the way that Capricorn energy is inclined to do when it's something that relates to their long term objectives. And I think that we can kind of dismiss, how doing something over a long period of time and getting that wisdom of just living and doing something over and over and over again.
Yeah, I see Capricorn, they are like just a little bit at a time. And then, over like 10 years, you get to the end of that and you're like, wow, I have so much knowledge and practical experience of all of these little things that I learned throughout my journey. So I think that's why, practical experience is a very like Capricorn sort of energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually putting like boots on the ground, doing the thing. It's not just like thinking about doing the thing. It's like doing and putting your ideas into practice and making things happen. And I see Capricorn is a very like a builder sign. Like
Hmm.
they will like shape things with their hands. Like they have a vision of how they want things to be, and they will put in the time, little bit by little bit, and then by the end it's like they have this amazing stuff. And then everybody's like, oh my god, how did you do that? When did that happen? They're like, piece by piece over the past few years. That's how it goes.
Well, let's talk about Capricorn with Cancer. And of course, these are sister signs. This is part of our sister sign series. And what you were describing, a lot of that could apply to Cancer energy
Mm-hmm.
as well. And it's focused kind of in a different area of life. It's a little bit more internal, a little bit more personal than it is more out in the world, the way that Capricorn energy can be. How do you see the relationship between those two in terms of like putting in the work and building something long term?
I think about it kind of like growing a plant. So it grows like you give it a little bit of water. There's like the top part that's growing up, but then the Cancer part would be like the roots. So there's like
Hmm.
the top part of the plant is Capricorn. That's the visible, very like, we reward in our society like people achieving things in the outer world, like having a good career, getting awards or whatever, having a successful business. And then that's kind of like that top part of the plant, and then the roots are that emotional foundation, the care tasks that are getting done, and that the plant cannot grow out into the outer world if it doesn't have that ability to get the nutrients it needs or the support it needs. So like having emotional support, having physical support, having just somebody that will nurture you allows you to go and grow strong. And um so there's like two those two sides of it. You need both to be able to be successful.
And I think people can kind of associate Capricorn energy with like being very capable and being very like money oriented. I think that's another thing that comes up a lot with Capricorn. And as we always say, Cancer is financial as well. And has to do with similar areas of life, but just kind of like the flip side, the sister sign side. So it's very hard to build an empire or build these long-term goals if, the roots are all screwed up, if the foundation is a disaster, if there's, wreckage happening internally, it's going to kind of manifest in some way in that external world as well. So, like having both areas of life in your field of view, I think is really important for whatever you're trying to do.
I really liked that like image in my head of the roots and then like the fruit up top. Cause yeah, I also, not to like go off of that, this is like totally different, but I also just think of like the family aspect, it's like mom and dad. And I think it's important to incorporate like both like Cancer and Capricorn. And I know this is like kind of, it's like trending or whatever right now, but like reparenting. And I think this is kind of like a good axis for like that reparenting, like you got to nurture yourself, you got to take care of yourself, you have to, be kind to yourself and protect yourself. But then that's like that Cancer side. And then the Capricorn side, it's like, okay, but you also need like to be responsible and have boundaries and, have discipline. And so you kind of need both in your life. You can't just be
Right.
like overly Cancerian and you can't be overly Capricornian, and you kind of need both.
I almost feel like, especially in media, the girl boss stereotype, like I feel like I've seen a lot of characters depicted that are really like good at their job, but then their like personal life is a mess. That's also that that's like the flip side of
Yeah.
that. And yeah, it's like it is very important to have a connection to both sides of yourself if you want to accomplish anything personally, professionally. You need mommy and you need daddy.
Yes.
You need your inside mommy and daddy.
Right.
Yes.
And it's important to say, like, we're saying mommy and daddy, but the reality is that astrology is a reflection of life. And so, depending on the culture that you grew up in, and obviously like any colonized people have had this very, you know, Adam and Eve type of imposition on like what a family is supposed to look like and what these energies are supposed to look like. So the reality is that Cancer is a more nurturing parent, and Capricorn is the more authoritative parent. And so it really isn't, the mommy and daddy part is like at this point it's beyond, it's not gendered in terms of like how we approach it. But a lot of people, if you're looking at very traditional astrological texts, that's kind of how it's portrayed. It is very gendered.
Yeah, I just don't see it being, especially now and like as we've evolved as a society, like we still have the gender roles, but it's a little bit like people can transgress those a little bit more now. So I think evolving our astrological, how we speak about it, because it's not always that the dad is the one working and then the mom is staying home. Like that's not what everybody's experience is anymore. And I think it's a little more accepted that that's, it's okay that it's not like that. So when I do speak about, like Cancer energy, that is like the more nurturing parent, when you see, I was thinking about, yeah, just like our colonized culture of it being like the mother's role being so overlooked, but it's necessary, that work, like literally reproducing workers for the system. But it's, labor, real labor that doesn't get compensated, that isn't, we kind of reward work with money as like an exchange of value, but the work that mothers do is just as necessary And we're seeing that now with like kind of our people waking up to the fact like, oh, women aren't having as much kids, like we're going to be in trouble because we don't have enough workers to replace. And I mean, that's just a consequence of like the dying empire. But
Yeah.
anyway, digressing a little bit, but
I do think that it is an interesting axis to look at in terms of, like having this conversation. The culture that we live in here in the United States, I do feel like is very leans very Capricorn in a certain sense. Like it is about, being out in the world, accomplishing things, doing things, making your mark, and individuating in this really strong way, exercising your power over other people. And it is this very negative, I mean, the way that, people here tend to think about that kind of thing is I don't like that. I don't like that boss stuff so much. But I think that as we are progressing as human beings and the conversation is evolving and we're unpacking and decolonizing different aspects of our social structure, I actually think that it's a very interesting reflection of how we view Cancer and Capricorn energy specifically because of that kind of gendered relationship, because our relationship with authority is so much about dominating other people and imposing our will on other people, and that's negative. And if some people have dads that are like that, and that's a very negative experience. And so you can see how that social aspect plays out in a family unit. Like it's like a microcosm of the society. And so I think as we progress and as we change our idea of like what authority can be, can authority just be leadership? Can authority just be standing up for ourselves and doing things that we feel strongly and passionately out in the world and developing those skills over time?
yeah.
And then can the Cancer energy be, having a healthy relationship with our emotions and making space for it and honoring, labor that is typically considered, and, not labor, it's considered something that should just happen naturally and is completely taken for granted. I think as we kind of balance that stuff culturally, like it's a very interesting reflection on the astrology as always. So,
Just an aside, the the jobs that are typically held by women, like I've worked in female dominated fields and male dominated fields, like I am Cancer Capricorn, but the male workforce, like that workplace is like they do, it's a lot easier actually to do stuff there than it is in like female dominated industries, even though the females typically we get paid less in those like pink collar jobs versus like blue collar, just because there is a lot more emotional labor expected of like, you know, a lot of women. I guess I'll name some industries, so like nurses and hospitality workers and like cleaners. Like there's a lot of, it can be backbreaking labor, and in addition you have like an emotional side to it that you have to like do both. But if you're in like a male dominated field, it's like strictly the work and you're not as much expected to manage the emotions of other people. So I think women, to just get the short end of the stick in this society in a lot of ways. And then men are kind of expected not to feel their emotions, or they are very cut off from that very young, and kind of just like through society trained to be like, that's weakness, which we kind of touched on when we talked about Cancer. But
I like to think of like the tradition aspect. I know that's kind of like a Capricorn word, but I think tradition is both like Cancer and Capricorn. And then Cancer is like, our ancestors and things like that. And then when I think of Capricorn, it's like that tradition, like the generations. And I think the generations falls like in between. And I just heard a quote like yesterday, which is why it's so like fresh in my brain. And the lady who said it, I looked her up. She's a Capricorn, but she said that tradition like bridges the gap between generations and it brings generations together. And I thought that was like such a Capricorn thing. But I think with Cancer, there's also a lot of tradition, like passed down traditions and like even like stories that are passed down from, generation to generation. It's just very, I don't know. that's also part of like that family thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think they're both very tied to like legacy in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Like our emotional legacy and our physical legacy. And, those two things can be one, and, they can be very closely related for somebody. And, maybe somebody leaves more of one than the other. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. So, well, thank you both for joining me for this delightful conversation on the mommy and the daddy of the zodiac. And guess what? This is the second to last. Our next sister sign episode will be Leo and Aquarius. So we are almost to the end of this series. So I will see you back here during Leo season. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.